construction projects across the continent.
So why is the U.S. standing firm in its opposition to joining this particular new bank? Jeff Cox is here. What's the deal?
Thanks, Bill. Well, Bill, the Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank poses the latest challenge, and the U.S. certainly has had no shortage of challenges from China over the years. Now, basically, as its name implies, it's set up to fund infrastructure projects in developed and developing markets in the Asian region. Sounds innocuous enough, right? Well, there's an interesting subtext here, and the subtext is that it provides a direct challenge to the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. Now, the U.S. exercises a tremendous amount of influence in the IMF and the World Bank through its funding, and it helps not only fund projects, but it also helps influence how those projects are developed. Now, this started off as a fledgling project last year. Now it's got 35 members, as Kelly alluded to, some very close American allies. So it's no longer just some shot in the dark. It's actually something that's quickly gathering steam in the world financial community.
And we bring in here, thank you, Jeff, Raveen Gandhi, Raveen, joining us right now is the CEO of GMM Nonstick Coatings. We were just talking about your business off there a second ago, which is fascinating, but what we really are interested in is your perspective here on this whole idea that by not joining with the AIB, the U.S. is basically setting businesses back from their dealings in the international markets for years to come.
Yes, I would say that generally I'm all for infrastructure. Any infrastructure makes trains run on time, it makes goods get delivered on time, and ultimately for people like us, it keeps prices low at Walmart, which is great for everybody. So if it's for infrastructure, I'm for it.
But is this a zero-sum game? I mean, should U.S. businesses be worried about the fact that some of our allies are going with this AIIB?
I definitely am not going to opine on the entire political system. What I can say as an entrepreneur who owns businesses in Asia, I think China is someone that, where we are, it's very capitalistic. It's a very good market. It's growing for us. It looks quite good. So I believe that the U.S. in the long run typically gets things right.
Well, I will opine on the geopolitics here because I think it's really interesting. This is what happens when you have a leadership board. There's going to be somebody who steps in. Now, China has been pushing the World Bank and the IMF to loosen up some of its regulations to give China greater influence. They didn't do that, basically at the behest of the U.S. So you have this leadership vacuum. You have China stepping in now and saying, look, we can do this too, and we can maybe do it even better than you guys can. Larry Summers had a blog post about this Monday that got a lot of attention around Wall Street and in Washington, just saying, look, it's not a Democratic problem, it's not a Republican problem, it's an American problem, that there's a development atmosphere happening out there, and we're going to miss the boat unless we get our act together.
Which goes back again to the question, Raveen, do you feel like we'll be at a disadvantage much longer term if the U.S. somehow loses a foot to... Let's put it this way. China has for a long time said the Washington consensus, the way the IMF runs things and tries to impose its ideology on countries, interferes with what it thinks will be a better approach. If China takes a different approach with investment, with partnerships, with development, would that affect your business somehow? Would you feel crowded out?
I mean, ultimately, again, the point I made earlier is that I think that the U.S. is actually going to get this right. I think that the U.S. is all about business. We are the most democratic, the most capitalistic, the most open, the most free, the largest economy, we're the most important, we're a superpower. I think it's going to stay that way. And I think that for people like me, I'm American. I have a salesforce in the States. I have a factory in China. I have a factory in India. I'm a global entrepreneur. I think that China is being good enough to us. Are there issues? Of course there's issues. But I think the U.S. is going to get this.
But what about Jeff's point of the perceived dysfunction in Washington, the squabbling between the Democrats and Republicans?
Yes.
You know, there is some confusion then on the part of our foreign counterparts as to exactly what the economic policy is in the United States, right?
I would answer this question most as a citizen. You know, I read Jeff's article, and without a doubt, I don't think we're going to find anyone who says there isn't a high amount of political dysfunction in this country right now, right? But I think that this is a blip. I think in the long run, America typically gets things right. I think that we squabble on the left, we squabble on the right. You could get hundreds of people in here to talk about both sides.
What do you mean by that? Does getting it right mean ultimately signing on, along with a lot of these other Western European countries, to this AIIB, or just getting it right mean trying to assert the IMF and the World Bank and some of these institutions traditionally seen as more American in their leadership?
Well, I mean, if you look at who's on the AIIB, it's a laundry list of our allies at this point. I mean, there's a tremendous amount of momentum for people that this thing is actually going to happen. And I think that in the end, America, one way or the other, I don't know if we're going to be a part of it or we're going to be on the leadership committee. You know, we're obviously concerned about the governance, the social aspect of it, the environmental aspect of it. Those are the things that America has kind of complained about. And I think that America will obviously do anything to hurt business.
Would you like to see the U.S. take a leadership role in this, though? I mean, don't you think that they need to step up?
I absolutely would love the U.S. to take leadership on this.
Yeah, I mean, the administration has been deafening in their silence about this. I mean, the only thing that we really have on the record is one of the undersecretaries of state, Catherine Dordelli, I think her name is, was on CNBC Europe a couple weeks ago and said, hey, you know, we're okay with this, you know, but we're concerned about governance and we're concerned about environmental regulations. So it's sort of a non-committal kind of a thing. But I think that they really need to figure out what's happening.
So here's what I can tell you on the ground. I have a facility in a place called Zhuhai, China. You know, we have a couple hundred employees there. This is a city that has barely 1 million people, so you wouldn't even have heard about it. You go there, there's Americans living there all over the place. There's Brazilian people, there's Mexican restaurants, there's Irish pubs. It is a boom town. And this is a place that would be almost a rounding error from a population perspective in China. My point is that we, entrepreneurs, are working together on the ground already, and I don't think at the macro level that's going to be, you know, screwed up by the high level. I think that in the end, bottoms up is a lot better than top down.
All right, Raveen, appreciate your on-the-ground perspective on this one. Raveen Gandhi is CEO of GMM Nonstick Coatings, and our Jeff Cox as well. Much more at Jeff's piece on CNBC.com.
Yes, we had a symposium on non-stick coatings during the commercial break there. It's very instructive. Thank you both.
Dishwasher-safe technology is advanced.
This is important.
Absolutely.
Dow's up 51 as we head toward the close with 18 minutes left here. The S&P's up 8, the NASDAQ up 18.
Coming up, not a pretty picture when our JP Morgan Chase CEO Jamie Dimon says the unintended consequences of new bank regulations could be ugly for